You're listening to Cinema Rex. It's an Iranian film podcast. Yeah, you're at the right place. Episode 34. A shorts collection. Aghdashloo Ahangarani Mazaheri Mozaffari. I had an epiphany today.
Okay.
That we should call it something like Shortcuts. Or Life's Too Short. And then we officially call this a subheading, and we come back to do this every now and then with like another guest. And we'll always do 4 short films. So like how we have Hollywood hit jobs as a subcategory, this would be a new subcategory of its own. But we don't have to do it every 10 or whatever. We just occasionally do it. So we'll call it Life's Too Short.
Brought to you by Cutco.
Or Shortcuts, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what are we officially calling this? I want it to be punny or not at all. Either a shorts collection or Shortcuts or Life's Too Short. Afra, you're the de facto producer.
Shorties.
Gordies?
Shorties.
How did you assume he said Gordies? If you know you didn't hear him well, why is your assumption?
Episode 34, Gordies.
I say we go with it, and then you just have to explain the joke.
Yeah,
every time.
Gordies.
Yeah.
It's a Cinema Rex. It's a Gordies special.
How you doing, Afra?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
Merry Christmas. Are you excited about Christmas like I am?
I am excited about Christmas like you are.
Yalda.
Farn is a Grinch mixed with Scrooge, mixed with...
I'm not a Grinch. I'm just not a traitor to my race. I celebrate Yalda.
Yeah, that's not Grinchy
Yalda.
at all. Happy holidays to you, Farn. Merry Christmas.
Happy Yalda, Kaveh.
Well, it's good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming on to this episode. Whose idea was this? Yours or Farn's? I don't think it was mine. To do a collection of short films in one episode as an amalgamation, or like a roundabout.
I mean, we were just kind of bouncing off of each other, but I love short films, so.
Well, the original thing to do a collection of shorts was when you and I came up with the idea for the podcast, Kaveh, we were talking about way back when. We were like, well, what about short films? What if we want to talk about shorts? And we were like, let's do them in collections. The only exception we had made even back then was House is Black. We were like, when we do an episode on House is Black, it gets its own episode.
And maybe this will be a recurring thing. We'll always refer to it as shorties, and we'll list off the directors, but we'll do 4. And I think the format's nice is I guess we sort of stumbled upon, we each kind of bring forward almost like a book report. Like we bring forward a short film that has moved us, touched us, meant something to us, is of significant import to us, and we will each present our short film. We've all seen each other's the films that we've brought forward, and then we'll break down the order slightly differently than we usually do it. But all the popular fan favorite subsections will be there, but in a slightly different order. You'll see it as we go along, and we'll sort of leave it to the person to introduce their film to the rest of us, and we'll discuss it from there.
And maybe we limit the synopses to just like the log line.
Yeah.
Because they are shorts. Like if you're like interested by the log line, you could watch these films like pretty quickly.
Yeah. The films are Retouch by Kaveh Mazaheri, which can be found on Vimeo. Literally type in Kaveh, named after your favorite podcast co-host, Mazaheri, Retouch, Vimeo. Search for it. You can find it. Afra, why don't you talk about what the title is of that one, where they can find the one you brought forward?
So the one that I picked is called I Am Trying to Remember. It's on YouTube. If you Google that, it'll come up as the Ghosts of the Iranian Revolution. It was attached to a New Yorker article of the same name. It's a short documentary. And so it came out kind of during the Zanza Nigi Azadi time. And it's kind of related to the history of those issues.
And you haven't mentioned the director's name yet.
Pegah Ahangarani.
And Farn, which is the one you've brought forward? And then we can all discuss what the 4th one is too.
I have brought forward a short film called Empty Your Pockets by a dear friend of the show and previous guest on the show, Tara Aghdashloo. It is currently doing the festival run, so you might have to wait a little bit before you can catch it online, but I'm sure sooner than later it will be available to watch online.
So this is the only one of the 4 you can't find online
right now, yeah.
So as of the day of recording this. And then what's the 4th one that we're going to be doing collectively as a discussion?
The 4th one, this is kind of one that we all unanimously picked, is the movie Motherland by Jasmin Mozaffari, who is also a dear friend of the show. She was on an earlier episode. That one is available to view on Vimeo right now. It went on to win Best Short at TIFF, or Best Canadian Short.
No, it made the Canada's Top 10 Festival, which is like the TIFF Top 10 Festival of like short films that kind of resonate. I mean, I had a short film that was there too.
It went on to win multiple awards, including one of the best short categories at TIFF, and it also won a couple of CSAs, which are like the Canadian Academy Awards.
Dude, Bashama, Dustana Aziz, yada, yada, yada. This is the Cinerex podcast where we talk all things Iranian film, cinema, filmmaking, directing, writing, acting, performance, producing, art direction, short films, puns using short films.
Shorties and Gordies.
Shorties and Gordies. I'm your host, Kaveh Mazaheri, co-host of the podcast. Farhan, who are you?
And I am your host, Farhan Moradi, co-host of the podcast.
I do have a question for you, Afra, because I feel like, what's your title at your job that you do?
Programming assistant at the American Cinematheque.
So you probably, do you watch a lot of shorts? I mean, I know you program mostly features, but by virtue of your position, are you poised to watch a lot of short films?
Yeah, if we have like film festivals and stuff, there's screeners that come in. And we watch a lot of short films. I also just watch a lot of short films on my own. I think like they don't get as much respect as they deserve. They're seen as just like an avenue for filmmakers to get to do before their features, but I think they're their own art form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like ballpark, how many would you say you see a year?
Like at
in
least
the hundreds?
Yeah, in the hundreds.
Wow.
Like Letterboxd right now says that I've watched 389 films this year, but like at least half of them are shorts probably. Like because it says like the average time of the films I'm watching is an hour. Yeah. So like it kind of evens it out.
Does it also have the amount of time of your life you've wasted watching bad shorts?
No, but I think it's solid.
I feel like with watching that many shorts, like the dangerous thing with shorts is a lot of them, if you find a good one, it's like a masterpiece. You'll never forget it. Yeah. But you probably have to slog through quite a bit of bad ones.
Sometimes if you find a really bad short, you also never forget it.
That's true.
That's true too. But there's so many more bad shorts, I feel, than there are bad features. I feel like
there's a lot of like mediocre shorts.
Yeah.
And then there's like few bad ones and few good ones. And then there's even fewer masterpiece shorts and terrible dog water shorts that like play in festivals.
Have you guys watched Hello Father Dog?
No.
Everybody go Google Hello Father Dog and watch it. It's 5 minutes. It is Iranian.
Oh, you told me about this.
You'll never forget it. You'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Is this like terrible or good?
It's the second highest rated film, Iranian film on Letterboxd after Close Up. But it's like both terrible and good. And it's don't show it to your parents. I made that mistake. But
okay,
you should check it out.
Okay, we'll bring it on the next shorts episode.
Yeah.
We'll have the director Michael Unesi on our show soon.
Shorts are one of those categories where like when you see them at a film festival, like if it's not an indication of like will this be good if it's programmed at a film festival.
Yeah.
I have seen some of the worst shorts I've ever seen in my life play at festivals, and then there's other movies that have been like ridiculously good that I've just randomly found online on Vimeo or YouTube that have never played in a festival, and not for lack of trying. So like it's a weird category. I love going to shorts blocks at festivals because you never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, and it's also like if you find a really good short that you really love, you can revisit it so many times.
Yeah,
so like,
yeah.
The films in this shorts blocks that I've seen, which it was my first time watching Empty Your Pockets, but all the other ones I've watched like 3 to 5 times each.
I also think as a horror fan, shorts are some of the most effective ways to get a really good, like you can achieve that goal of scaring your audience in like 9 minutes really effectively. Whereas with comedy, you can probably get some good laughs, or with like romance, you can probably tell a sweet story. But to truly reach the effect of the genre you're going for, I think horror could be one of the most effective genres in terms of getting that audience the feeling you're looking for. Yeah. And also as a platform to like really leapfrog into becoming a feature director.
Yeah.
In the horror field, shorts are like truly an avenue to show what you can do.
Suspense too. If you can build suspense in a short, you know you're doing something right.
Yeah, I think a lot of like contemporary horrors started as like proof of concept shorts.
Do you have a favorite short film of all time, like non-Iranian or whatever?
It's honestly probably the one I picked. I'm trying to remember, but another one that I really love is called Fly Fly Sadness, and I just want to shout out this filmmaker. She's Canadian. She's Haitian Canadian, and her name is Miriam Charles, and she's made a ton of short films. Like they're experimental docu-fiction types, like dreamy, and they're all shot on like Super 8 and 16 millimeter. She has one feature called This House. But her short film Fly Fly Sadness is like, it's beautiful. It's 5 minutes long and I love it. You guys should check it out. It's on the Criterion channel.
Do you have a favorite all-time short, like Iranian or non?
I was thinking about this. I don't think I do. There's like a number of shorts that I'll think back to. I had a favorite short filmmaker for the longest time. His name is Patrick Boivin. He's from Quebec. He used to just like make shorts and put them on YouTube. He started out originally making these like stop motion little like animation bits using his kids' action figures. But then he went on to actually start making full-on short films. They were very good. The level to which the bar has been raised for short films is nuts. Like if you ever go back and watch any short films from like Scorsese's early days or Nolan's early days, you consider the fact that they had feature films greenlit off of those shorts is mind-blowing to me. Considering the level to which you have to be making short films now in order for it to lead to like someone being like, oh, you're a competent filmmaker. Here's the keys to the bank or to the vault. Like, go make a movie, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I want to give a shout out to this first one's called Still Life. And its production value is not good. Like the only good version you can really find is like a 480p, 560p like version. It's so like grainy and pixelated, but it's called Still Life by the director. The director's name is John Knotz, Knautz. And it's about a guy who like he's like been driving all night. He ends up in a town, and the town is covered in mannequins. Like everyone in the town is a mannequin. But every time he turns his back, the mannequins move closer. But when he faces them, they stop. Really effective, creepy. And the entire town is mannequins. It's like almost like a dead city, except for everyone's a mannequin.
Whoa.
Really creepy. And the last one is a film called Fauve, Fauve, by Jeremy Comte. He's a Quebecois director, and it's essentially about two boys, some rural town. Like I don't even know where it is, but they start playing a game of like one-upmanship, like anything you can do, I can do better. They're like 12-year-old kids, maybe like 10, and something goes horribly wrong, and it's one of the most tense films I've ever seen in my life. Fauve, Fauve, Fauve. It was at one point shortlisted to be an Oscar-nominated film. All right, so why don't we go first, Far? Since I think, do you want to go first?
So the first short on our list is Empty Your Pockets by Tara Aghdashloo. I'm just going to read the log line of the film and then we'll dive into it. An airport customs officer deals with various passengers while trying to secure his job navigating a totalitarian system. It premiered at Black Star Film Festival, and it has gone on to play at multiple other Oscar-qualifying short film festivals, and it stars Kiarash Dodgar in the lead role.
First of all, it's needless to say that we all loved all of the films I think we watched. Like, we don't need to say with everyone. Like, we all like these movies.
Yeah, if we picked it, it's because we like the movie.
But one of the things I found incredibly striking was, aside from really great performances, I really was impressed with the production design. Because knowing that this thing was shot in like a building in North York, which is like northern suburb in Toronto, it really does feel like Tara and the production design did a really great job of capturing this feeling of like an Iranian airport.
Yeah. I've never been in an Iranian airport.
I go twice a day.
It definitely felt similar to like airport vibes that I felt in Turkey and like Belgium.
I've been to an Iranian airport once, but I was 5 years old.
And how does this hold up?
Very well.
Sick. All right.
But yeah, no, I watched it with Shahrazad, and she also said that they did an amazing job recreating it.
Nice. Okay.
I think that's like if you choose like a one location space, you can really put everything into making that look as realistic as possible.
Well, I think in total there's like 4 locations in the whole short. There's this kitchen. There's the family kitchen, which is also really nice. It's like small. It's nice. It's like I buy that. That's Iran.
Great production design there too.
Yeah.
The kitchen.
Yeah, it looked very lived in.
Was crowded. Yeah.
There's the security lineup.
Yeah.
Or the airport, which I'm assuming there's like the men's section and the women's section. I wouldn't be surprised if the women's section is the same spot as the men's section, just with like the curtains put up.
Right.
I could be wrong. And then there's the locker room and there's his boss's office.
Right.
And each one of them looks really good.
Yeah.
The bathroom as well.
Bathroom.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about the bathroom.
I mean, I know we're not doing too much plots. I mean, but it's just to give like a little bit more expansive overview. Kiarash is essentially playing this customs officer. He's like relatively new at his job, right? Like, is it like his? You get the sense it's not. If it's not his first day, it's like still early on, right?
Yeah, he's still pretty
yeah.
new. They all talk about how he's like green, and
Yeah.
he tells his superior to watch out for him and all this stuff.
Yeah, and he's got like a very sweet moment with his, I guess, is his mother or grandmother that he's like worried that she's not taking her medication.
I think it's his mom.
So do
Yeah.
I.
And from there, it's sort of like it goes through like a day in the life of him doing his job, and each one of them, each kind of new passenger that's showing up, he has to go through the rigmarole of like going through their stuff and asking what's the like why are you taking these things. And what I really like about it is each kind of person is a little snapshot of Iranian life. This guy's the artist. This guy's up to something shady. This is just an elderly man trying to get by. It had this really nice vignette sort of like snapshot of Iranian lives through their luggage and through the stuff they carry, which I thought was really nice. Like really good like casting too. I thought even the people that had smaller roles, like the main character's boss, he has two levels of superiority, right? The boss who's like on set and like behind the curtains, like that guy, those guys feel like truly like they could have been cast in a Rasulov film or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The performances were great.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you're bringing up Rasulov because before going into the film, I was suspecting Kiarostami vibes, just like knowing Tara and knowing like some of her favorite Iranian films.
Yeah.
But I got more Rasulov vibes watching it. Did you guys feel the same?
Yeah. That's what I had that note written down.
Yeah.
Same.
Which I also think I remember seeing this at the Real World Festival, and Tara was there. She went on stage and spoke about a Q&A, and she did mention, I think, and Tara, if you're listening, I apologize if I'm like making a mistake, getting it wrong. I'll make a correction in the next episode if I'm wrong. But I think she did reference like Kiarostami as a tonal corollary of what she was aiming for. And I do see that in a lot of the characteristics, but tonally overall, I do feel, and it's just a massive compliment I'm saying, it is more, I feel like leaning more towards Rasulov, who kind of deals with a little bit more of the absurdity of bureaucracy better. That's got a Rasulov vibe.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, Kiarostami's influence on Rasulov is like clearly also there.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it kind of takes the Kiarostami vibes and makes it a little more like cinematic and darker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas Kiarostami ends up being a little more almost like docu style, right? And I think that Tara does that too. I think that the tone in this film, she strikes a really good balance of it feeling dark and cinematic, but still feeling very grounded and real.
One of the things about Rasulov is that when Rasulov is making political cinema or anything about individuals, it's kind of a shock when something happens, you know?
Yeah.
When, like, you know, just in all of his films, there's a shock. But with this film, with Empty Your Pockets, from the first scene, you know that this person's going somewhere where he doesn't fit in. You know, it's not a shock later on when you find out what's happening.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
That's kind of like where the Kiarostami thing happens, is that all of a lot of Kiarostami's films are about a fish out of water. You know, it's somebody that doesn't fit in the surroundings that they're in. But same thing with Empty Your Pockets. In the first scene, you know, it's like, this doesn't look good on me. It's not just the color. The mom's like, you know, like, this is not for him.
Oh, great point.
And then he goes there and like you're already looking for clues of like, why is he doing this? When is something gonna go where like we notice that this is just not his thing, or, you know, and then it goes somewhere else with it. But it's the fish out of water.
Can we do, since we're all kind of amalgamating some of their bigger ones, can we like briefly dance into the deeper analysis section right now?
Yeah.
Two things I want to mention. Major themes and motifs in this film. The ants. The ant is the opening shot. The ant crawling on the T. The sculpture is an ant. And there's a third ant reference, which I don't know if you guys caught, but it took me my second viewing to notice. I didn't notice it when I was watching the festival. And I'll get to that in a minute. Also, The Trial by Franz Kafka. There's a specific reference to showing that one of the books was The Trial. And I read a lot of Kafka. I love the themes in Kafka. I referenced absurdity of bureaucracy, which is specifically poignant in The Trial. Kafka also deals with guilt and existential anxiety. The Trial is also about power and authority, isolation and alienation, and judgment and the search of justice. If these are not all themes that are involved in this film, I don't know what is.
Of course, I know who Kafka is, and I know all about his work. But for Afra, who doesn't know, do you want to just explain a little bit about your point there, Kaveh?
Excuse me? I have a degree in philosophy.
That's really embarrassing that you don't know who Kafka is. Go ahead, Kaveh.
He's an early 20th century Czech novelist who is famous for writing, most famous probably is Metamorphosis, a story about a man who wakes up one day and is turned into a giant beetle.
That's technically false.
He was turned into a beetle.
Different translations have said that he's a beetle, but in the original language, it's just like an insect.
Oh,
and so they don't specify. But for some English translations, they wanted to give an image to it, and so that they said beetle or cockroach sometimes, or
that is really insightful for someone who doesn't know anything about Kafka.
Yeah, that was just for Farhan. I wouldn't have said anything if Farhan wasn't talking shit.
Yeah. No, but the thing that's really interesting about Kafka is he's so dark and bleak. The term Kafka-esque is reference to something that is almost like hopelessly hopeless, like enduringly hopelessness and bleak, but also with a sense of like dark satire and comedic. Kafka is like almost Coen Brothers-esque in his style of writing. He's like talking about bleak stuff, but with a sense of comedy and levity. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the biggest, funniest points of like Metamorphosis, for example, is the guy wakes up and realizes he's turned into a beetle or insect. And his first thought is like, shit, how am I going to get to work today? Like his biggest concern is like getting to work. Yeah. Not that I've turned into a bug.
It's the same thing in the trial.
Yeah, without turning into a bug though.
Well, yeah. But like he's not really concerned that people are here to arrest him for a crime he didn't commit. He's more concerned with like, what is this going to mean? I'm going to lose my position at the bank.
Yeah. And I just think like going back to Empty Your Pockets, it's like the only time that you're getting like a piece of literature that was deliberately also being translated. So like this guy's coming in with an Iranian adaptation of Franz Kafka's The Trial, puts it on the conveyor belt. I also got to say, I love that opening shot too of the conveyor belt when Aghdashloo, the credits are showing up. I really like that shot of the items coming one by one. Really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Like Kafka's themes are always like so certainly about absurdity of bureaucracy and how like ridiculous this is all that we kind of fall in line. And
what you're saying with the bug too nicely ties back in, like you were saying with the ant.
Yeah.
I also want to say there's a fourth ant reference, I think, and maybe you guys should ask Tara if this was intentional. But at the end of the film, like the final scene, I think,
yes,
when his hair,
it's 100%.
Yeah, his hair,
his hair
is like this, yeah.
That's
and then he's like trying to fix it, yeah. Okay,
he's like very clearly telling the audience, "Oh, I feel like the ant, guys."
Yeah, no, I thought Kaveh had listed the 3 already, and I was like, that one was also there.
No, So we can talk about the ant now too, because the ant is the motif that's carrying through a lot of what they are. Opening shot. Mm-hmm. So the guy puts down, one of the guys who's showing up, he's showing like a piece of art. And there's a big discussion of whether or not it even is art. But they're like, what is this? And the guy says, it's a leaf cutter ants. There's a fungus that hypnotizes the ants to bring it leaves. And in exchange, it feeds the ants. They are codependent. But sadly, over time, the jungle goes bare. Farhan, what is that an allegory towards?
I think it's a reference to how there are people who work within the system in Iran who are the ants and the regime is the fungus. That the fungus kind of infects these people, makes them go out and do their bidding, and in exchange, it gives them some scraps. You know what I mean? It like gives them a little bit of nourishment. And it's the same idea here is like, this guy's doing the bidding of the fungus, and he's like, he wants to keep doing it, but he's like not sure. And then he goes into the office and he's like, listen, I need a little bit more money. And the guy's like, okay, here's a little bonus for you. Keep doing good work and we'll give you like a proper raise later. And he's like, okay, great. Thank you so much. Like they have a symbiotic relationship. They're entirely codependent, like the ant and the fungus.
Yeah. He needs it for his mother who is not taking her medication because whether her medication is running low or whatever. It's like this guy's got like things he cannot ignore that need financial stability.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say to the thing, Afra said this, but without referring to what he's doing. So it's like the end.
Well, first he's going through all the little things that he's collected, all the contraband that he's collected from people. And sometimes like he was giving people a hard time, likely just to like take something from them. Like, for example, the deodorant, right?
Right.
And as he's going through the contraband that he's confiscated and the money that was given to him, the little bonus, then go ahead, Kaveh, what happens?
He sees in his mirror, he's got two of his hairs in the front of his head are like pointed upwards. like 2 antennae. Is it called antennae on ants?
I think so.
And he's like resembling the look of an ant. And when he sees that, it like frustrates him and he brushes his hair down. And it's something that's so, it could be so like a small idiosyncratic human thing to be like, oh, my hair is the thing, I better fix it. But it's also like the symbolism of him.
Yeah.
That is the Kafka thing too. It's like he's now become the ant.
Yeah.
Also that thing of like him with his hands like rubbing at his hair like that is also a thing that ants do. Ants will stroke their antenna. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing I thought about the ant correlation is ants are known to like, they scurry around. There's so many of them. They're just kind of going about their own thing. They're busy, like little ants going around. And that kind of felt like the crowds at the airport. You get the shot of the feet walking by, some going left, some going right. And it's like that chaotic nature of like millions of ants moving at once. This is just a convergence point of like hundreds of thousands of people going about their lives. Ants-like.
I have a couple things for deeper analysis.
Oh, good.
On the conveyor belt after he has the conversation with his boss, the next shot we see a caged bird, the Persian rug,
right? Yeah,
and
yeah.
then American money,
right?
It's potentially drawing parallels between like the relationship between Iran and the United States, and how the U.S. has kind of, in some ways, benefited financially from the state of affairs in Iran.
Good one.
And also how we are kind of that caged bird. You know what I mean? I really like the title treatment for the film. I thought it was really nice, as you had mentioned, Kaveh. Also, I love seeing all of our friends, and like a lot of our friends, like in the background. Like Navid is one of the BG.
Yeah.
In the scene at the airport.
The OG and the BG.
Yeah, the OG BG. As well as there's a couple other crew that I recognize. And the mom is... I've worked with her before, Farshida Nasri, and she's really good as well. Dadyar we've met at Mehmooni's and stuff. Like it's cool when one of these films is made locally, to then all of a sudden recognize tons of people involved.
Okay, can this be a feature?
Yeah,
I think it could be.
Yeah.
I could see this as like you said, a Kiarostami. Kiarostami or mixed with Rasulov sort of style.
Yeah.
Character drama.
Yeah, I agree.
It would need more plot turning points for like a 2-hour runtime. But
yeah, I mean, we don't even know what's going on in his personal life. So like it could, there's so many things that can go, and then it affects the way he acts at work, the back and forth. Yeah.
Like what's going on with his mom. Maybe then he goes to the pharmacist and there's like stuff going on with the pharmacist. Like there's so much you can get into with this.
Yeah.
Does he make a choice to do something to interfere with the system?
Yeah. And what are the consequences
because at
of
the
that?
end, you're getting the feeling like, oh, he's becoming one of the ants. Does he go all the way in, or does he end up pushing back?
He's self-aware of it too.
Yeah, exactly.
So now he has a choice. Does he continue or does he make a change?
Exactly.
Which I think is a good way to end a short, because to me, the ending of a short is kind of a setup for the rest of a story. It's like, oh, damn, what happens now? Like a good short will end in a way that you're like, you want to see the next scene. You want to see where is this going, which is often why a lot of times when you see Q&As for short films, the good ones, usually you have people in the audience being like, are you going to turn this into a feature? Are you going to make a feature sequel? Are you going to adapt this into something more? Yeah, I think definitely it could be a feature. Do we want to talk about what feature we would pair this with?
Yeah. What feature would you pair this with?
Afra, go ahead.
I have 2.
I also have 2.
One is Rasulov's There Is No Evil.
Yep, that's one of mine.
Yeah, it's
different. That was mine too, and that was my only one. So.
It's a different part of the bureaucracy, but it's the same thing of like, it's different. That one's like different stages of when you're getting brainwashed into the system and when you're becoming part of the system. My other one is a film from this year called Terrestrial Verses, and it's basically like there was like 15 short films put together, and it's just like little moments kind of like this of like singular incidents that are representative of like the bureaucracy that people have to go through in everyday life. Yeah
It's funny that you picked 2 movies that are basically like a compilation of shorts, because and that's actually why I didn't pick Terrestrial Versus for my second one. Is when I first picked There Is No Evil, I was like, well, I guess this just like if you were to watch this and then There Is No Evil,
Yeah.
it would just feel like you were watching a series of shorts.
Yeah.
So for my second one, I actually picked The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which is also from this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seed of the Sacred Fig and this, they both kind of tackle this thing of like, here's an individual who works within the system. Now, how are they going to react? You know what I mean? And in the case of Empty Your Pockets, I think we're kind of sympathetic to the main character. And I think we kind of assume that maybe he'll break free of it. But then with Seed of the Sacred Fig, you kind of see where it heads if he takes a different choice, you know?
It's like the stages. Like for There Is No Evil, it's like the first part of that is somebody who has been in that system for so long. But that's another thing. If we're talking about can Empty Your Pockets become a feature, the feature would show, you know, how in Seed of a Sacred Fig, it's the kids that show that, you know, that clash at home. If his mom in Empty Your Pockets ends up finding out what he's doing at work, that could create a clash that, you know, things can arise out of that.
Now I want to see the feature of this. But yeah, mine is There Is No Evil for all the reasons you guys listed. I was just quiet because you're saying great points that I agreed with. You didn't do behind the scenes and trivia at all.
Oh, yeah. I wrote a bunch of stuff down.
Hans, what happened?
I think because it's a whole other section of my document that I like, when I got to the end, I was like, oh, this is it. So Tara grew up traveling back and forth and found that the airport to be a beautiful liminal space and kind of like a microcosm for the country, especially when it comes to the power dynamics. So that was why she picked this as a setting for the film, because it was a way for her to kind of explore and comment on Iranian society in a very confined space and setting. She said a lot of people are part of the system because they're just trying to survive. The inspirations behind the film and what happens in the film come from her own travels, as well as specific anecdotes from friends and loved ones. Here's a funny little anecdote for something that actually happened. The ants that they used in the film, they're not VFX, they're real ants.
Oh, wow.
And the producer had to drive 2 hours to get these ants and bring them to shoot with. And they weren't behaving the way that they had planned. Like they were like trying to wrangle the ants to get them to do specific things. In the end, their star ant, the ant that actually like did what they want, was one that they found on location.
Oh my God.
It wasn't even one of the ones that the producer drove 2 hours to get.
Oh, that's really funny.
Another little challenge that they had in the making of the film, they lost their principal location 10 days before they shot the film.
Oh.
So they had to completely change plans on like how they were going to make it.
Oh, wow.
This was Tara's first Persian language film. And she said that tapping into the diaspora in Canada was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first of her films made in Canada. It's her third film overall. And it had a bigger scale. The producers that she worked with, they were a little scared until they got some funding to help make the movie. But one thing that was exciting for Tara was connecting with a network of Iranians in Canada and the United States. And making the film during Women Life Freedom felt cathartic and therapeutic for the cast and crew. Tara started as a poet, then began writing stories and working as a journalist before getting into film. She was intimidated by the film industry because she grew up surrounded by prominent filmmakers, and it made her want to avoid it. So she eventually gravitated towards journalism because the focus was on stories and not the artist.
Mm-hmm.
But while she was telling these stories, she kept feeling the pull more towards the artsy side of storytelling. And so first she kind of went into documentary and then into fiction. That's everything I've got for behind the scenes and trivia for Empty Your Pockets.
Thank you, Farnjun. Okay, let's move on to our second film. Should we have like a stinger between these?
Did you want to do Festival of Cons or no?
Uploading movies. I thought we'd do one at the end for all of them.
Sure. My con for all of these films is I just wish they had a bigger budget.
I don't. I think bigger budgets can ruin things. If we're talking about, if this is an Iranian cinema podcast, it is the history of under-budgeted films. So
yeah.
let's embrace it.
The history and celebration of under-budgeted films.
Yes.
All right, from there we will move to a film called Retouch by Kaveh Mazaheri. This is one of my favorite short films of all time. I've shown it to a lot of people. It's a story about a woman named Mariam whose husband, who we know very little about, dies in a very freakish home accident involving weights. getting trapped under his neck and he can't lift them. Within the first 3 minutes of the film, you see Mariam struggling to try to help take the weights off his neck. When she's unable to do it, she stands back and watches. And from there, she leaves to go to work, and we are left with lingering questions as to whether the husband has survived, died, somehow escaped, left, and it's a day in the life of her going about dropping off her kid at daycare and going to work, and at the same time trying to figure out what happened with her husband back at home. Like, did he get out? But at the same time, sort of covering her tracks in case the worst has happened, and laying these breadcrumbs for what can ultimately be an alibi if she's to come home and find her husband dead. And I think this film is fucking, in a lot of ways, it's a masterpiece in short filmmaking. Partially because of how much it says about their relationship without showing anything in their relationship. They barely exchange a few words to each other before the accident happens. And I feel like you know so much about their dynamics. The type of husband he is. The type of father he probably is. The type of relationship they've had as a married couple, or maybe they're not even married. I think that she references their husband. And there's stuff we can go into a deeper analysis, but I'll leave it to you guys. Take it away. So what are some of your thoughts on this film?
I thought it was great. I mean, you showed this to me first, like, I don't know, like 6 months, 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like really blown away at the filmmaking itself. Like, I think the film is very patient and it doesn't try to do too much. And like you said, it's just like little details of like how quickly you know the situation. I guess like in deep analysis, we can get into some of the other little like details that stood out to me. But I loved how effortlessly it shows the dynamic of, you know, the shackles placed on women in modern Iranian society and how that's not just political in the public sphere, but also in the private home space.
Yeah.
And so it's a cultural issue as well.
Varn, compliment my pick.
Did they compliment my pick?
Compliment my movie pick.
No, it's a great pick. I've seen a bunch of Kaveh's movies, like Kaveh Mazaheri. You can definitely feel his voice in his films. So I've seen one of his feature films and a couple of his shorts now. And a lot of filmmakers, they don't really develop a consistent style and tone and voice until they're a few movies in. With Kaveh, I actually find it's like there's a consistent through line in his voice with just the movies that I've seen, which is very impressive. Oh, I like that she, at the beginning of the movie, the wife kind of just like allows her husband to die, then goes about her day. Like, she doesn't want the death to inconvenience her life. You know what I mean?
Right.
She's like, I have to get to work. I can't deal with this right now.
Also, small detail, when that's happening, when the weight is falling on him and he's like starting to struggle, she's like doing makeup in the mirror. And I just love that like duality of that detail. I also wanted to, Kaveh asked me this, like when he first showed me this film, and he said, why do you think it's called Retouch? And I had said, because like her job is, you know, like Photoshop and stuff, like to fit into what's appropriate for Iranian culture and stuff. Like that's what she's fixing in photos.
Yeah.
And in the same way, yeah, she's also retouching her own life and cutting somebody out of it. And so,
well, cutting somebody out of it and also retouching the circumstances surrounding the events that led to that.
Exactly.
Like she's presenting this in a new way that's a little more palatable.
Exactly.
To the life that she wants to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, without too much of a spoiler, like a lot of the day ends up being like her kind of covering her tracks, calling her husband's friends, calling her husband's mother, being like, have you heard from him today? Like, I heard that he didn't show up at work today. The work has called me saying he didn't show up. I don't know. I'm getting a little bit worried. And it's like really brilliantly a masterstroke of like Macbethian setting in these traps to like cover yourself, you know, like very interesting.
Yeah.
I only have one brief behind the scenes trivia on Mazaheri. This is something that Retouch told me, but I found it on IMDb too. Following the woman life freedom movement in Iran and Mazaheri's participation in social protests, he, a supporter of the movement and an advocate for change in Iran, openly criticized the pervasive influence of security institutions in the country's film industry. In a symbolic gesture of protest, he withdrew his 2 Crystal Seymours, the pinnacle of Iranian cinema recognition, from the Fajr Film Festival. Mazaheri publicly declared his unwillingness to create works of art under the Iranian regime, which he saw as oppressive, and subsequently moved to France. What Retouch told me was he had put on an Instagram post displaying his footage of him ceremoniously burning the 35mm tapes of the films that he'd shot in Iran.
Whoa.
He burned the films of his tapes, like maybe the master copies, or maybe they were just like prints, but like symbolically being like, I disavow all of my previous films that I've shot under that government. So
Wow.
he's now moving. He lived in France and lives there and openly criticizes the Iranian government. That thing about Retouch was going to be my deeper analysis, but I was going to more ask you guys what you thought about it. Like, why is it called Retouch and stuff? But I think we covered that for deeper analysis.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Oh, wait. One last thing for deeper analysis. Sorry. In the end, it wasn't even her husband that could make her cry. It was the sound of her own daughter crying,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which I think was really clever to show, because it's like,
Yeah.
look, even in death, her husband can't get that reaction from her.
Yeah.
And everything is so delicate. Like, it's so patient with letting her break down.
Yeah.
Just it's the crying voice of the future generations, especially the future women of Iran, that is what sparks a reaction from her.
Can this be a feature? I, as you'll be very surprised to find out now, is I do not think it can. I actually think this is most effective as a short. I almost feel like the story is complete.
I disagree. I think this is a really interesting setup for a first act of a movie, where now she has to deal with like investigations, like what happened to your husband. Clearly you killed him, blah, blah, blah. I could see it going in the direction of like some Farhadi-esque stuff. Also, having seen Botox, I can see how Kaveh Mazaheri would develop this into a feature, and I would actually be excited to see it. I don't think it needs to be, but I think it could be. Like, if someone was like, here's $20 million, can you do it? I would be interested to see it.
Before you give an answer, Afra, and agree with me, because I know you will.
Yeah.
I think my big thing is, I think a film like Empty Your Pockets or even Motherland would actually be like a better, like there's more, like I think there's a good chance it'd be a more successful film as a feature because there's more story to tell. I actually think even with everything you've just listed, I could see it being less effective as a feature, and this specific instance, a more effective short film because of what I sense should be the ending.
It just depends on how you explore it, right? Like, if you look at a lot of Farhadi's films, like you look at A Separation, and on face value, if you were to do a short film on just like the first 5-10 minutes of that movie, you could do a movie that's just like kitchen sink 5 to 10 minute version of that, of the first act of the film. And if you just watch that, you'd be like, this doesn't need a feature. But part of, I think, what makes Farhadi's movies so great is that every like 5-10 minutes, there's a twist that all of a sudden makes things so much more complicated.
I think I agree with both of you guys, kind of. Like, the question of can it become a feature, I think is different than should it become a feature. I think it definitely can be a feature, and in both, I think it could be stretched out, and it could also be just be the beginning of something else. I think maybe being the first act of something longer would make it a better film as far as like storytelling wise. But I think then it would lose the purpose of this. Like, as a short film, the purpose is so specific and exact. But then if you're trying to show what's happening after, then it just becomes another bureaucracy film, and that'll be the focus. So I think it can be a feature. It just like, it would become a different film. It would just be like about something different in that case.
Yeah.
Excellent fence sitting, Afra. Way to take a stand.
Thank you.
I just want everyone to get along, and I agree with both sides.
This is how he hedges his bet in his relationship with us.
No, I think it can be a feature. I don't think it should be, though.
Excellent.
Like, it would be a different film.
All right, let's go to what feature could you pair this with? Do you see yourself pairing this with?
I, funny enough, paired it with Botox.
This guy.
I had this written down. I didn't know that you guys haven't seen it.
Ever seen.
Yeah, and it's like similar vibes, similar feelings.
Yeah.
The premise is different enough where it's not like you're watching the same thing twice. Yeah, I think that there's a nice through line there for an evening.
My feature to pair it up with is Jean Dielman, 23, Quaidu, Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles. Yeah, it's obviously not the same tone, but that's kind of considered like the peak of these themes of women kind of revolting and pushing back against the shackles placed on them by a patriarchal society. And so, but at the end of Jean Dielman, it's like 3 hours of, just everyday life, cooking, shopping, cleaning, things like that. And then there's this explosion at the end. And so I think Retouch, similarly, is this woman who finds herself by accident maybe at this opportunity, but then she decides, no, this is enough for me. And it's this like, I think that decision of not helping is just as explosive as what happens at the end of Jean Dielman.
Yeah.
Like at the end of Batman Begins, when Batman says to Ra's al Ghul, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you either.
So Kaveh, what's your feature?
My film is
If it's not Batman Begins, I'm gonna be so mad.
no, it's a film you haven't seen. It's Pedro Almodovar's Volver.
Oh, I love that movie.
For obvious references, right? You can see why without ruining it for Farhan.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, like, the corollaries of literally subject matter. The thing you said about women kind of taking, what was the term you said? You said, like,
Pushing back and revolting against patriarchal society.
that's all over Volver, right? With the same sort of, like, you end up with a dead body on your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first movie I thought of.
I knew I was missing one, and I think that was the one I was thinking of.
Sure.
Like I was like,
Of
I
course.
know there's another
You were thinking
movie.
of Batman Begins.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Almodovar, though.
Batman Begins?
Yeah.
That's Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Kaveh? If you and Retouch's movie was done, would you have paired your own movie with this, or is that weird to pair your own movie with something?
I would have been weird. I wouldn't have done it. I would have asked you to do it.
He sends me a text. He's like, "Hey, just FYI, I need you to do this really quick."
Put some money in a red envelope and
Yeah.
slides it over.
The letter will say, "You are an ant. Do as you're told." Because I'm a fun guy.
Hey.
All right, on to the movie 3. Go Afra, go.
Go Afra, go.
Okay. The film that I picked is I Am Trying to Remember by Pegah Ahangarani. And it's a short documentary. It was made alongside The New Yorker. It was published with an article where Pegah talks about, why she made this, the process of how she came up to this. So I'll get to that later during trivia. But the log line is, after discovering an old photograph from her childhood, the filmmaker is thrust into a whirlwind of memories and begins her journey of learning the story of why her dear Uncle Gholam's face is scratched out in the photograph that she finds, every other photograph she found of him. And every time she talks to family members, they also are hesitant to mention that he ever existed.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting pick. I couldn't believe. First, I was like, "Oh, what is this pretentious shit that Afra submitted for his short film?" I'm like, "This whole thing's gonna be told through photographs." God damn it, this guy is stretching his cinephile muscles. But I have to say, damn it, if you don't know what you're talking about, this documentary not only shook me to my core, but I thought it was like, genuinely, it's a horror film. Like, this felt like a horror film.
Yeah.
Because
It felt like a horror film to you?
yeah.
Did we watch the same movie?
Do you not agree, Afra?
Yeah. Farhan doesn't care about mass executions.
No, the movie was excellent, but it didn't feel like a horror.
Well, not horror, but like, it's kind of like at a certain point, you're like, it all settles in and you're like, fuck.
I thought it was good, and I thought it was like very emotionally compelling and dark, and it definitely hits you to your core.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't feel like a horror to me. But that's funny.
Well, it's a horror documentary. Like that is kind of like a very specific subgenre
Maybe.
of like death documentaries. It's a thing.
It's definitely very dark.
Yeah.
There's a moment when people start pretending like he didn't exist, and then she's like, and then I went asking other people, and they're like, they kept saying that, yeah, Gholam was a good man, and then Mahin was also a good woman, and Mariam was also a good woman, and Farhad was also a good man, and it's just photograph after photograph of people who've had their faces scratched out, and that's the horror of it. Is like these people have been erased, and these pictures are now taking on completely different contexts to the point where these guys feel cursed. It's like a series of cursed photos of dead people who have been not just dead but wiped from people's memory because they no longer want to confront the reality of what's happened to them, or they can't talk about it. And that's the horror. It's not just that they've died, but that they've been erased, which is a word that she constantly uses. To me, if you don't think there's some sort of existential horror from not even only being killed, but being wiped from history, you need to read more Kafka.
One thing I really wanted to mention that stood out to me.
Yeah.
I love the little bits of the film where she uses soundscape with photos. So, for example, she'll be like, then I went and I asked my cousin, do you know what happened to the photo of Gholam? And it's like a photo of like this guy playing ping pong.
Yeah.
And then there's like
love
soundscape of like a ping pong ball getting hit back and forth. It's like, then I went and asked these people, and it's like these two people sitting in a room with a radio above them and a Che Guevara poster on the wall. And then it's like playing soundscape of like a Che Guevara speech over like an old radio.
Farhan loves his Che posters.
Yeah. It goes through and with every photo in that sequence, and it does a nice soundscape that really sells even though it's photos, it like makes you feel like you're there.
That's a great point.
I do have some like socio-political questions against the backdrop of what's happening here that I'm a little unclear with it. And maybe she's talked about this in the article.
Go on.
But from my understanding, like there's the revolution that happened in 79 that people actively protested. And then, Farhan, correct me if I'm wrong. So is she suggesting protests would continue over the next 10 years over what? Khomeini taking over?
Yeah, so after the revolution happened and Khomeini took over, there was a lot of backlash against them because that was not the plan for a lot of the revolutionaries. It was it was split. And then, so a lot of people,
like all the leftists, for example.
Yeah, a lot of the leftists and the intellectuals and the political adversaries at the time, they turned on the regime and they were like, no, this is not what we wanted. We don't want this.
Yeah.
Also in protest of the Iran-Iraq war that was prolonged just to kind of, make Iranians tired and kill a lot of the youth that could oppose them. And then it peaked in 1988 with mass executions where the exact number is not known, but at the end of this film they say 4,000, which is kind of like it's a safe number. It's like at least 4,000, but it's kind of
conservative.
Yeah, it's conservative. And so that's kind of the moment, like after that execution, or after those mass executions in 88, that we were like, okay, these guys are staying, like they're here to stay. That puts so much fear into everyone. And then to talk more about being erased, those were like mass executions. They were buried in mass graves without identification. And so like on top of their memories being erased, there's no like proof that they lived or died,
So my question is, was there genuinely a fear of discussing these people now?
Yeah.
Because neither of us grew up in that era, but like I'd never, and my parents were like fortunate enough to leave right when the revolution happened. Like they just left.
Yeah.
My dad had to escape because he was in prison in 79. But this idea of like, what was the fear? Like, what were people really scratching out people's faces in photographs? Like that was a thing that was happening.
Really? Because when I was Googling it, I wouldn't be surprised if this is my theory, and then I'll flip it to you. Afra, this is your film. You tackle the BTS with it. My reading of that was that this was maybe something that happened with like her family, maybe like the odd family here and there. I think the fear had more to do with like, by association with political prisoners and people who were executed, there was a fear that you could be also targeted by the government. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were people out there who did this here and there, but like in general, not talking about those people openly. I know that was a thing that definitely happened, where outside of your house, you didn't talk about those people.
Yeah.
The thing with scratching out the faces specifically, I had never heard about that before. Not doubting that it happened in her family. I'm just saying, I don't know if this was like a widespread thing.
At the end of the film, it shows that she talks to multiple people and they say that they also have family members like that. But I don't think, maybe it's not like every single person, but I think people who were like her uncle Gholam was the front line. He was like a leader of the revolution, And so he was I think a very notable person for the regime. And so maybe for very specific political prisoners, they were more strict about those kind of things.
Right. Yeah.
And so the threats felt more real than just anybody who just opposed,
Yeah.
That's something maybe can be searched through more. But I remember, like, I think I talked to my parents about this and it wasn't like a shock to them that the pictures were scratched out.
Right.
Yeah.
The only part I want to like, the reason I bring this up is that I could see people not wanting to talk about these people outside, but I think if it's anything that's a testament to Iranian perseverance is that people keep people's memories alive in their homes and within their own family.
Yeah.
Do you not find that way within your own families?
Oh, absolutely. But we're also in the diaspora where it's a lot safer to do that stuff. But like in the 80s, during the Iran-Iraq war, during the rise of the Islamic Republic, in Iran, must have been like a completely different feeling.
And everyone's going to be different, right? Like it's not monolithic. Like for example, after the revolution with Baha'is, there were some who were like, no matter what, you hold on to your values, even if there's a gun pointed to your head. Because they would be like, tell us you're not a Baha'i and we'll let you go. Or tell us you're like a spy for Israel, we'll forgive all your crimes and you can go home today. Right?
Yeah.
And some people would be like, fine, I'm not a Baha'i, whatever. And then they get to go back to their families. Other people would say, no, sorry, that's what I am. These are my beliefs. And they got executed for it. But some people are like, you know what? In the face of death, I'm going to tell a lie if it means that I can survive and take care of my family.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think if you have executions in your family, there's going to be people who will be like, don't talk about that person. We don't want to associate with them. We don't want to bring on the ire of the regime. But then I'm sure that there were other people who were going around being like, no, you know what? This guy was a good person and we need to remember him. you know?
Yeah.
If we can dive into deeper analysis, there's something I specifically wanted to tie into that, if that's okay.
Let's do it. I mean, it's all kind of, it bridges together, so go for it.
Yeah. Like not being allowed to talk about these people that have died, in a sense, their memories can fade. And it goes back to that thing of I'm trying to remember, is that when you don't talk about these things, when you pretend like they didn't happen, then you can't remember them. You're losing them. And it goes back to this idea from Ernest Hemingway that every man has two deaths, when he is buried in the ground and the last time someone says his name. So it's almost like Pegah's working overtime to try to make sure that these people don't die their second death.
Agreed. That's kind of one of my points, is that I think film and images in general are a tool of remembering. They're a form of permanent and communal collective remembering. Like that's what cinema is. That's what the power of cinema can do. And because of that, if forgetting is the weapon of the oppressor, cinema, which is a tool to remember, is the weapon of the oppressed.
Damn, that's poetry.
I got you. I think that's what Iranian cinema in the 21st century has been. That it's been dissidence, and it's been like, that's what in No Bears, Panahi has a line when he's presenting in front of the village elders. He says, "Can I do this my way on camera so that you'll have undeniable truth forever?" Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the thesis of post-revolution Iranian cinema, is that cinema is this permanent record of the past, and it connects us to our future. And so I think this is what this film does, is that while, like we were saying, like it's so important for Iranians to keep the memory of people alive. And I think she's remembering something from the 80s, which is such a tumultuous time where people were confused and scared. The Iran-Iraq war was happening, like thousands of people were dying there. Then these mass executions happened, and there was a failed revolution that happened. So people were hopeless. Like it was the most hopeless they ever were. And it took like a long time after that, because there was a lot of pushback against the regime in the 80s. But after that, it got quiet until probably the Green Movement, maybe a little bit before. Like it took a long time to get rid of that fear. And part of that was just a new generation came up. Like you said, Pegah's working overtime to keep that memory alive.
Yeah.
And her family did talk to her about it, just not at the time.
The quality difference in the footage when it cuts to the revolution felt pretty drastic to me. And I like that because it's like showing this very nostalgic view of Iran prior to the revolution. It's like the footage is definitely dated when you're seeing the pre-revolution stuff with her family and the photos of the people and like the Super 8 footage that Gholam shot. But then when you get to the revolution stuff, it's like that footage has gone through the ringer. It was like shot Super 8, then it was put on a VHS tape, then it was digitized, then it was squished. It like does not look good compared to everything else. And I like that because it's like, oh, these are the horrors of the revolution. It's like we were sold a lie, you know? Mm-hmm. It ties in nicely when all of a sudden it goes to static, which is like this newer thing. It was like analog video signal as opposed to film. And it's kind of that age, and it shows that time period as well.
I like that point. My last thing for deep analysis is, it's not really like an analysis of the film. I just think it does a really good job of showing the duality of Iranian life, which is like sadness and intensity, but also joy and kindness. So Gholam was this super kind man. Like she talks about him like he's the kindest soul ever. He was so thoughtful and kind and whatnot, but he was also the front lines of a revolution, which was a historic, like dark period in Iranian history. And then he got executed, but his memory is tied to his kindness and whatnot. And it's just this duality of like good and bad, evil and sad, and all these different things. And I think that's like in the diaspora as well, but just like Iranian life post-revolution or the last 50 years or so is just, there's this like really sad memories of things. Like there's this sad presence that's there of this failed revolution, of mass executions, of the country being taken over and taken hostage and being oppressive and whatnot. But then also like some of the funniest people, some of the, like everyone's always laughing, and there's so much joy in like everyday Iranian life. So I think that duality is captured really well in this film.
Have you mentioned all your behind the scenes stuff?
Not really. I mean, I just took from the article.
But one of the things that's worth mentioning is Pegah Ahangarani is like most notably, more than anything, known for her acting. She's an Iranian actress.
Yes.
Film director and musician. She had made 9 documentaries and acted in over 40 feature films. Her movies have been shown in many festivals, including Berlinale, Toronto Film Festival, Venice Film Festival. She received many prizes in different festivals, including Best Actress from the Cairo Film Festival, Best Actress from the Locarno Film Festival, Best Director from the Cinema Verite IFF International Film Festival, and Best Director from the Isfahan International Film Festival.
Her father is also a notable filmmaker.
I don't know.
Jamshid Ahangarani.
Oh yeah.
And he was the subject of her next film that she made.
I've been looking for that. I can't find it.
My Father?
Yeah. But she also just had a new film this year called Child Soldier.
Yeah, Kudak Sarbaz. Kudak Sarbaz.
Yeah. It's really good.
Probably Kudak Sarbaz.
What else were you able to pull out from that document from the article?
I mean, just basically everything's real. That she like this was like an occurrence of hers. Like she actually came across this photo and like started asking questions. Every photo and video in the film was taken by Gholam. The film is her attempt to, quote, remind the audience of what happened in a very dark time in Iran's modern history, which has not yet been acknowledged as much as it needs to be. End of quote.
Yeah.
The article and this film were released together in January 2023, months after the killing of Gina Mahsa Amini, and she found the film an important reminder of what had happened and is now being repeated, and why we need to remember these things to make the future better.
Mm-hmm. Great. Can this be a feature film? I say no. I think it's perfect in its brevity.
I said, Afra's waiting now for me to say it, so he's like, so he can play both sides.
He can sit on the fence.
Yeah. I said not in the same way that this is like a docu-memoir. I don't think it can. But if you were to adapt this into like a period piece, like biopic about her and Gholam, then I think you could.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. I also think that it should not be like it's perfect the way it is. This is my favorite short film, so it's perfect the way it is. The only way it could be a feature is if you just like it's talking about more people, like at the end when she hints at all these other people, like. But then it wouldn't be the same thing, like you said. It wouldn't be the memoir of this one person's personal experience.
Yeah. It would be kind of interesting to see that that relationship between this little girl and this like charismatic, charming guy, and he's like a revolutionary. I think that it would be a really interesting film.
Yeah.
And what would we pair this up with? Double feature lineup, or feature that you'd pair this up with? I'm going to go first so I can take Farns away from him. I would pair this up with a recent film we did, Junam.
I knew it. So
Farn has to say something else now. Because Junam is sort of like the reflective point of this. It's like a person who's never lived in Iran, never been to Iran, trying to remember a past that isn't hers and a history that she hasn't experienced through her grandmother, and her lack of communication through her is the barrier. So you could almost see this like Bizarro World, this documentary as a feature, and two very different versions of people trying to cope with the past and hold on to history.
Yeah.
But from two very different standing points. So I think they would actually pair really perfectly. And I'm so glad I got in before Farn did.
Yeah, I have the same pick for all the reasons Kaveh said. I don't want to tell you what my runner-up is because I was on the fence between Junam and another film.
Batman Begins.
Yeah, Batman Begins. And the other film is a better fit for our fourth movie.
Okay.
So I ended up saving it. And I
what if
landed
that's
on
my
Junam.
Film? That might be my film then.
I guess I'll tell you when we get to Motherland, won't I?
Well, no, my double feature for this one is Paris Police.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not that one?
I mean, I'll tell you in a couple minutes.
Okay. But Paris Police, it also tells the story of that time period, and the little girl in Paris Police also has an uncle who was taken from them, and they're the idea of like forgetting him and forgetting he exists kind of appears in Paris Police as well. And yeah, it just kind of shows the before and after of the revolution in a way that kind of matches well with this. My second pick is...
I like that you're using the Persian pronunciation of a Greek word applied to a French movie.
Yes.
To talk about it.
Yes.
Okay, and our final film. Farhan, introduce.
And our fourth and final film for our Gordy's episode is Motherland, directed and written by Jasmin Mozaffari, starring Behtash Fazlali. Here's the logline. During 1979, at the height of the Iran hostage crisis, Babak goes on a trip to meet his fiance's parents and ends up confronting the realities of what it means to be an Iranian immigrant in a patriotic post-Vietnam America. Maybe I'll just say again, I really like this movie. I'm a little biased because I was able to contribute in small part as they were finishing the film, but I had a very visceral emotional reaction to this film. What about the two of you?
I really love this film as well. I've told Jasmine this countless times. I've told Retouch this. I think he's a very good actor. I think, having seen Firecrackers and knowing Jasmine as an artist and director, I think like this is a culmination of all of her work so far. And like I can see her not experimenting, but almost like a maturation in her filmmaking and her writing too. My only problem with the film is that the people they reached out to provide feedback for, I think they could have picked better people. I think it's got such a strong opening, which I think is really crucial for any film. Me and my Kaveh's opening shot corner.
Yeah.
But particularly for a short film, this has such a punk rock opening, and it's kinetic energy. It says a lot about the character and time and place. And I think like if I broke it down, I might be like off by one or two, but I feel like the entire film is like 6 scenes or 7 scenes.
Yeah, it's
realistically
not a lot of scenes, yeah.
And it's like each scene packs a punch. It's like very like purposeful. It's in and out. It's well written. Great job, Jasmine.
To your point of the opening, Kaveh, this movie just like immediately looks like a legit movie from the 70s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like this like indie short made just now. It actually feels like a real movie from the 1970s or the early 80s that you would just like walk into the theater and watch.
Yeah.
It's so cinematic. The scene in the car, I think, very naturally gives you all the exposition you need. I know a lot of times people come out of film school and they're like, oh, this scene has exposition, blah, blah, blah. There's a way to do proper exposition and dialogue.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't feel spoon-feedy. And this, I think, is a masterful example of that. Because the conversation between Bobak and his girlfriend, Katie, in the car on the road trip, it tells you everything you need to know about their relationship, where they're going, where they're at, what their concerns are. And it doesn't feel like you're tuning into a soap opera. Like it's a very real conversation. And there's a natural progression into the reveal of seeing his black eye. Like with the sunglasses, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not contrived. It feels very real.
Yeah. I also have to just shout out that Retouch has such Al Pacino, 1970s Al Pacino vibes in this, which when I first saw that opening image, which is the main one they used for the marketing of this film,
I
was like, oh, it's so Al Pacino vibes. And Jazz was like, yeah, that's like exactly the vibe we're going for.
Yeah.
And
they
say it too.
And he says it. He like, the main character says, he's like, yeah, look like Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Look like from Serpico.
Yeah. Afra June.
I mean, I agree with everything you guys just said. And like Farhan said, like you feel a connection to it. Like something just feels different. And I think with this film, I think every Iranian film made in the diaspora after this will be in conversation with this. Because this film essentially just shows why we're all here. It's very similar to my parents' story. Like they came here for school prior to the revolution and their plan was always to go back, but they couldn't, And so a lot of family did that. Like they went back and forth. They got problems when they went back. So my parents just didn't go back. And that's like, it's such a sad start of a life, And so like the final scene of this is just so devastating where the phone booth scene happens and he's begging to go back and it just doesn't make sense. But then the last scene of him just accepting his fate and going forward regardless is just beautiful.
When he's having the conversation with the dad, it's so tense and it just feels like the dad's gonna deck him.
Yeah. Because
he like genuinely feels like this guy's exploiting his daughter. And I think that Jasmine does a good job at giving humanity to the villain of the film in a way. So kudos to her. It's easy to be like, here's this mustache twirling villain.
Also that he was an immigrant as well. And he like acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's John Ralston. He's a wicked actor. He's in a lot of films. Infinity Pool, Ready or Not. Great actor. And kills it in that role. I was going to say, in that final scene, just a question for you guys. Is he crying because the crying in the phone booth, is it an ultimate breakdown of the pressure that he's under? Or is he receiving, and this might be like me converging some other stuff from another short film in my head, but I remember the first time watching me, like, is he receiving news that he's not liking? Or is it just a lack of communication with his mother? Like the literal distance and the fact that the phone is chopping out, like forcing him to break down and cry.
There's two elements to it. One, it's just that like the pressure he's under, like you said, of like every single day he's having the conversation either with his friend or in his head of like, when are they going to kick me out? Are they going to kick me out? Am I safe here? Everyone hates me here. people who are non-Iranian don't really get who are from this generation don't really get the pressure of the post-hostage situation. It's a lot like being Middle Eastern post 9/11 of like, everybody's looking at you like, what are you doing here? Go home. Yeah. That kind of thing. And I think it just like when his entire plan of like the one good thing that was going for him was just shattered, and it was met with like insults and like just shattering his identity, which is what the conversation with the father had done. I think it just broke him down, and he's like, I want to go home where I'm accepted, where I belong. And then the part with the breaking up, that's like I actually talked to my parents about this after, because a short film that I'm like considering making is would also have to do with like calling back home and whatnot. And at the time, in Iran, like the lines were just like messed up because they didn't want people calling in and out. So it was really, really hard to reach people back home.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. To this day, when Iranians of that generation speak on the phone, it's like loud and slow.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
Hello.
That's just like, yeah. Because that's how, it was years that's how they would have to communicate to back home. Yeah. That's so funny. I didn't even think of that.
Even on like Zoom calls and stuff with like like relatives, or like FaceTime calls with relatives back home. It's like, and it doesn't matter if they're outside of Iran, if they're inside of Iran. This is just like an immigrant thing.
Hello.
Where like that generation is like, how are you? How is your day? And like, and all the younger generation,
each other and
and all the younger generation are like, why are you yelling?
That's a great point. Oh my god! But I think that also like it creates even more distance. Like you're not able to just like have a conversation. And so that's like off-camera context as well. Yeah. Of like that's what he's used to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Any behind-the-scenes stuff or are we gonna use the interview with Jasmine?
Well, we might as well just use that. So we'll go to an interview with Jasmine.
Sure.
And then we also have a little snippet from Arian Moayed, who's one of the executive producers on the film. Jasmin Mozaffari, welcome to the show.
Salam.
Our first question comes from Kaveh, who is currently on vacation with his lovely family. Jazz, can you please tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the film?
Well, it's a film based on my parents, but specifically my father, also named Babak, who came from Iran in the late 70s to Massachusetts, and was in the US during the 1979 hostage crisis. So it's like that's the impetus for the film. The seed of the idea kind of came from thinking about him. I was going to make another film about him and a bunch of dudes in Worcester, Massachusetts, but it was all going to be in Farsi, and I don't know Farsi well enough to make a whole film in Farsi, so I switched it to this. You know, all the details are almost exactly from his life. However, I dramatized them, and he didn't meet my mom until he was in Canada, which in this story, he met her in Iowa. Between them, they were kind of like us two against the world. But my grandfather, who was German, he was still born in Canada. But his mom came from Germany, just like he says in the film. And his mom struggled they were coming from Berlin to settle in the prairies in Canada, and she got very depressed, his grandmother, and then he had to raise his siblings, which is part of the film as well. That's said in the film. But my grandfather wouldn't speak to my mom for 2 years when she found out she was marrying an Iranian guy.
Did you have a relationship with your grandfather?
I did. I mean, he died when I was like 15, but eventually, like, my grandfather and my dad became best friends. Like, my dad was the son my grandfather never had, and my grandfather was the dad to my father, because my father's own dad got murdered when he was quite young, so in Iran. So they actually became so close after the fact.
Kaveh asks, can you talk to us a bit about the things you learned about yourself and your family in the making of the film?
I discovered and learned a lot about my family in this process, so much actually. And that was like one of the reasons why I wanted to make the film, is like as a way to understand my father more, as a way to understand my family more, and to understand just Iranians' experiences as they were in the US at this time, which was brutal. It's actually more brutal than I realized. And the archives show us that. Actually, the University of Texas archives was my favorite thing to dip into. And it's not like a widely available archive, but I got access to them, and then we had to pay for the footage. But man, the footage in that really shows an America that hated Iranians. and were violent against them. So that was part of what I learned. And then I learned about the resilience of my father and also kind of what type of fun guy he actually used to be. The version of my father in the film isn't the dad I knew. He became a lot more serious as time went on, but like he was this kind of like swaggery, cocky guy. And you see over the course of the film and his arc that there's something that his light is a bit dimmed based on the experiences during this time.
You had mentioned when you were going through the archival stuff that there were certain things that you couldn't use or you could use. There were just like some parameters. I don't know if it was financial restraints or just like what you were allowed to use from their archives. Were there specific things that you wish you were able to show from their archives that you either didn't have access to, the quality wasn't good enough, or you didn't have the funds for? And if so, what were those things?
Yeah, the archival footage is so incredibly expensive. You have no idea. I think it's $90 US per second. So we had to be very careful because I also didn't want to use too much archival in the movie. I just wanted to like set the film up, the context up. So in the archival footage, one of the things that I remember that I think is funny but also tragic is there was a protest in Texas where all these like dudes came together and were like, Iranians go back home, And then there was this guy holding up a sign that says, I'm Mexican, not Iranian. Just so you know, like FYI, guys, don't mistake me for an Iranian person. And he had a little board he carried around. I guess not at that point. They were like, you know what? I'd rather you be around than an Iranian person being around.
The irony of that.
I know, exactly. The irony of that is so interesting now when you think about it.
Yeah, so many Iranians in especially the southern states that try to align as strictly as they can with the Republican Party and push themselves as far away as they can from like Mexicans and Black people and indigenous people.
Yeah. There was one other clip that's actually on YouTube. It might have been taken down now, where there was other people of color and Black students in universities and also white students. They would surround on campus these like two Iranian guys that looked a lot like you, Farhan. Like they had like a mustache and you know what I mean? And they were just like, they were trying to say their piece, and these other like students of color were like, you need to go back to your country and you won't let us have the oil. So what is that? And they were so angry. You know what I mean? Like there was no solidarity between POC students in that regard.
Yeah.
And then there's another clip that's actually in the movie. There's a Iranian American student. She has like a hijab on, and she's like, and she's so polite, and she says, I believe there's a subtle sentiment against Iranians. And because in the classroom, there was fights.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, there would be like cell phone video of this. But in the classroom, all these students would gang up on the Iranian students. And I don't know how many professors came to the aid of Iranian students. My dad had a professor who said, anything I can do to help you, I'm going to help you in Massachusetts. Because I'm worried about you. But I don't know if all professors were that nice. So it's really, 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 I would love to see a full documentary about that. And one other thing just was there's a interview with like a mixed couple, like a Iranian woman and a white American guy, and they had kids during that time. And they're like, I'm worried about my kids growing up here. So that was really interesting.
Kaveh asks, can you talk a bit about the evolution of your work? Even just the difference in approach and process and personal feelings towards Firecrackers then to Motherland.
Both those films are really personal to me. I think Firecrackers is like the first feature I ever wrote in my life when I was 26. And I never wrote a feature before, and I started writing it. So for me, it's like not refined, like I like parts of it, but like it's not, it's like, oh, look at little baby writer Jasmine trying to, and then so I found like it took me it took so much out of me to write Firecrackers, even though to me, when I look at that film, I'm like, it's less sophisticated in a lot of ways. But with Motherland, I think I had grown a lot as a person, and I'd written other things between those two films that didn't get made, but I had practiced writing. And I had also directed a bunch of TV. And so I think from like a filmmaker standpoint, the process was a little bit smoother for me, a little bit more refined. They're both personal. I just think with Motherland, there was always like this big question mark of like, how do I let the audience understand the stakes without making this like the hostage crisis, it can't be about the hostage crisis, really. It's about these characters. So it's like the process of researching, I love to research a lot. It doesn't matter what I'm writing about, even if it has nothing to do with like an event in history. I just research a lot, even about like themes, and like even with Firecrackers, I was reading so much bell hooks and watching like Trump and Hillary Clinton debate and all these different weird things about, like I just like to research. So those were the same, but the complications with Motherland is like, I don't want this film to be a film about the hostage crisis. I want this to be about these two people, or Bobak, really. So I had to like spend a lot of time just like finessing the script. And the hardest scene to write was the one with Werner, the dad. It was so hard to write that, because it's like, how do you put in, and I mean, it's still there's still some exposition through dialogue. It's just like, couldn't really avoid it. And I try to avoid that a lot, because I don't like that. I don't like to give a lot of exposition through dialogue, but it's with that scene, it was like almost impossible to truly avoid it. But it was like, how can I make this still feel somewhat poetic, somewhat full of tension, but also understand the background of this man we're only going to meet in the scene. And then because it's a short film.
Yeah.
So that was difficult as well.
Kiarostami has entire movies that are just set in cars, and it's all exposition, and it's just pairs of people talking to each other. If you were to retell the story of Motherland from Katie's perspective, how do you think the film would have been different?
Oh my God, it wouldn't be the same at all. I think Katie's like a little naive. Like, I discussed this with my mom, who's very open, thank God, but it's like, that kind of like white girl naivete that she has. It'll be fine. That's over there. It's not affecting us. I honestly think it would be just a movie about her like romantic love with Bobak.
Right.
And it would have been it wouldn't have been a compelling movie at all. Because she's in a fantasy world. She's a little bit naive. Like, even her dad says she's naive, but he's not wrong. Like, she just wants to get married and have the dress and stuff. Like, I think I'm not to undermine her completely, but it is that white girl naivete about not really understanding the implications of dating a person of color, especially at that time. You know what I mean? They're not having these like highbrow discussions about that.
Didn't your dad convince your mom not to move away the morning before she was supposed to move away?
Yeah, I think they had a night. They met in a library, and they had flirted a bunch of times. And then my mom was out at a club. She's gonna move to BC the next day from Alberta. And then she saw my dad, and they had already built this tension between them. And I think they like got drunk, and then the next day my dad was like, "Don't move. Let's start a life together." And she did. Wild times.
One more question from Kaveh. What was your mom's reaction to seeing the film for the first time?
My mom's like the one person other than my producing partner, Caitlin, who hears the seeds of ideas from the very, 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 very beginning. So she was not like, it was never a shock to her. She was there the entire development period. She'd seen cuts. She saw the raw footage. Like, she was an extra in the dancing, like, Thanksgiving 1979 scene. She was an extra. She's always an extra. So for her, it was not a surprise. She was just like, she was so excited and so happy. My dad's brothers, I think, always find it hard to like, they miss him a lot. So it was like hard, but I think they were very proud of me. His younger brother, Beiruz, was like the one who was against me having his photo in the film. But then I think when he saw it, he liked it. So yeah, they're all very proud, and they always say your dad would be proud. So that's always makes me happy.
Thank you so much, Jazz. Now we're going to flip the conversation over to Arian.
Arian Moayed is an accomplished Iranian-American actor, writer, and director, best known for his Tony-nominated performance in Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo, his role as Torvald opposite Jessica Chastain in the Broadway revival of A Doll's House, one of my all-time favorite plays. He's also known for the Netflix series Inventing Anna, and of course, his role as Stewie Hosseini in HBO's Succession.
Also as Agent Cleary in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Arian co-founded Waterwell, a theater, education, and film company which focuses on socially conscious productions. His current and upcoming projects include the thriller horror film House of Spoils on Amazon Prime, the dark comedy horror film Shell, which recently premiered at TIFF, and the upcoming Guy Ritchie film Fountain of Youth. Arian is an executive producer of both Sierra Urich's Junem and Jasmin Mozaffari's new short film Motherland, and we are honored to get to briefly chat with him.
Arian, welcome back to the show. We know you're busy with Sundance as well as Blind Runner, so we'll keep it brief. The story of Babak and the cultural whiplash he experiences in the film seems to be cyclical, with the 79 hostage crisis, then the Gulf War, post 9/11 US, and again with the recent conflicts in West Asia. Why do you think this period piece is so fitting and necessary for audiences, Iranian and otherwise, to see today? And also, what is it that drew you to this film?
An absolutely brilliant question. Iranian and otherwise, you're right. I mean, the reality is so much of our stories are dictated by the current events and the political structures that are happening at that moment. So to hear about Iran, as an example, you only know about Iran through the news items that are happening on your local stations or on, nightly news. And what you see is the worst of the Iranian people, the corrupt mullahs that have taken over the government since 1979. We rarely get to see any of those other stories. And when you have a moment to get a chance to see someone else's personal life, like in Motherland, and what Jasmin Mozaffari has done is so beautifully, is you get to see what it feels like in this period piece of Motherland at that moment. Just because the news was one way doesn't mean that every single human being living in Iran, living in the States, wasn't going through some serious traumatic moment. And what's so particular about Motherland is that, and what drew me to the film, is that story not only being very relatable to me and my family and my brothers and my sister, but what's so remarkable is 99% of audiences know nothing about those stories. But the moment they see it, they immediately recognize it. That's a beautiful thing about Motherland that I'm so glad to have supported and I'm proud to be executive producer on.
Thanks, Arian John.
Sending you love.
To listeners, if you are in the New York area, please come out to support Blind Runner, a play written and directed by Amir Reza Koustani, which is being presented with Arian Moayed's company, Waterwell, at St. Anne's Warehouse this month. Blind Runner is the story of a political prisoner in Tehran who asks her husband to help a young woman who was blinded in a protest to run a marathon in Paris, culminating in a daring cross under the English Canal. And, if you're in Utah, enjoy the Sundance Film Festival, for which Arian is serving as a juror in the U.S. Dramatic Competition category, along with Celine Song and Reynaldo Marcus Green. Now, back to the show.
Deeper analysis.
I think the general setting and premise is very contemporary, even though it's from the 70s, or from like 79, 1980, because West Asians have faced the same backlash in North America and in Europe multiple times throughout the last like 50 to 100 years, right? Like we've got the hostage crisis, which is around the time that this film takes place. In our generation, we had to grow up kind of in a post 9/11 world, which also had similar feelings towards West Asians or quote unquote Middle Easterners. And now, obviously, with the situation in Palestine, I think that it's terrible because West Asians are constantly having to deal with the backlash of Westerners in the wake of these terrible events that are happening back in West Asia. And a lot of times these things are happening because of some form of aggravation at the hands of imperialism or colonialism being forced on the environment. It kind of creates a pressure cooker and then it explodes and then everyone from those parts of the world catch the heat for it.
I think a lot of the films that we talked about today were about post-revolution and the things, how life changed for Iranians in Iran. And it showed how everyday life was changed for people in Iran. I think this one does a really good job of like immediately after the revolution or like during that time, life changed for Iranians because a lot of Iranians were displaced now. They were living somewhere different for the first time. This was the first like mass migration of West Asians. And at this point, everyday life for them here was also not normal. Like I think we've gotten to a point now where like, it's not quite the same. But at the time, like life was so scary. I can't imagine what that is because there was nothing to look at. There was never like, oh, we've been here before. We've done this. what do we do? Like, people came here without plans, like in Motherland, and as far as like my parents' situation too, like they came here to study and then their plan was to go back. That was the case for a lot of people that I know as well.
Yeah.
But then they had to adapt in the moment with like no support essentially, and just figure out how to live. And I think this film just sets that up so well, so that, like I said, every Iranian diaspora film to come after this is providing the context for that, of like why those stories exist.
Yeah.
I like to look at something it's a bit of a departure from things that I'm sure Jasmine and the people involved in this one have talked about in the past. But I like this idea of the theme of the lie as a recurring theme that might come back up in our favorite quotes. But I don't even want to talk about the line that we're all going to reference later on. But this idea of the American dream and the reality that hits you in life, the big lie. You have characters in this film that all either feel that they've been sold a lie, or they believe a lie, or they're living a lie. And this like lack of identity, this search for placement, even from something like Bobak's character who says, "I can be like," he says, "I look like Al Pacino." Then there's like the Bruce Lee posters on the wall too, and it's like his absorption to American culture. Like, he watches these movies, he wants to be part of them, but he's not. When he meets his girlfriend's mother for the first time, and he mentions his name, and he says his name is Bobak. I don't even think he says Bob yet.
Mm-mm.
And then the mother goes, "Oh, sweetie, I'm not going to remember all that."
Yeah.
It's like such a dog whistle racism that she, like, it's so insanely racist, but it's not your covert, like overtly, like she's just like,
But that's everyday racism. Like, that's what
it's
people,
everyday racism.
yeah.
And it's like, those are the moments he's not being lied to. It's like a woman bold-faced being like, "I'm not going to remember all that."
Yeah.
It's these like microaggressions, right?
It's not accepting.
Yeah, and I think, but then there's the flip side of that where she almost exotifies him in a way, where she sees him and she's like, "Oh, he's so handsome," blah 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 blah. You know,
He's a handsome one, I think she says.
yeah, he's a handsome one, which, like, to me it kind of plays into this thing of like fetishizing and like exotifying some of these people. You know what I mean?
So when she says, "I'm not going to remember all that," he is then faced with the father, and he corrects himself by saying, "My name is Bob,"
Yeah.
which is the lie. And to which the father goes, "Bob doesn't sound very Iranian." Meaning, like, I see you for your the misconceptions you're providing me.
You're trying to fit in, but you're just not.
Yeah.
You're not. And culminating on the line that he says, speaking about his German forefathers who've come to this country and the promise of what is to be brought here. And he says, "I was sold a lie." And how universal that line is to speaking towards everyone who's in this situation, from the Iranians who've moved here, who with the promise of, so it's like they're all in this same boat of like the promise that was supposed to be provided to them, like, is not coming to fruition, and how they each victimize themselves.
Yeah.
Even the racist is like, "I'm a victim
Yeah.
because you're going to take my daughter and make her your fucking green card," to use his exact words. And it just speaks to such human levels of lack of empathy for one another, where people, even in their most racist, feel they're being racist because they're preserving an idea that they probably in their heart of hearts don't know that is a lie, like this idea. So yeah, that's my deeper analysis of the idea of the lie that we live as citizens.
I think also it's just a part of like reactionary, like people are just a lot of racism that happens in the moment and as a reaction to something like the hostages crisis is just reactionary to this idea that there's this new person coming here and something's being taken away from me because now they're here.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that people have with immigrants who come from Mexico right now, or affirmative action as like a thing, like that people don't like like it's not taking away from you. It's just giving somebody else also an equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think it ties into there a little bit.
Especially with like that thing of immigrants who want to pull the ladder up behind them.
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, I got in, I got mine."
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Can this be a feature? I believe yes. I feel like this and Empty Your Pockets are the two that are most deserving of a feature-length film.
I really want this to be a feature because I think more people will end up watching it. But I think it stands alone as like it's perfect the way it is as well. Like I loved it, and I think, like I said, like I do think short films are their own art form. And so I think like thinking that a film needs to become a feature, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I would really want to see the feature version of this.
Okay.
I do think that it could be a feature. I don't think it needs to be. Again, with all four of these, it comes back to the same thing for me is, does it need to be? Do I want it to be? Not necessarily. Can it be? Yeah, I think so. I think that there's enough story here that it could definitely be. I've heard a couple people at some screenings talk about, could this be a mini series or a series? That one I kind of disagree with. I don't think any of the films from today could really be a series. I think there's an argument for Empty Your Pockets could.
Same.
Because it's like, it's one location, but there's different things that in different scenarios that come to that location. But yeah, feature, I could see it. I don't think it needs to be though.
Agreed.
And what feature would you pair this with? I want to go last because I think I have an answer neither of you have thought of, and it'll be the funnest one.
So funny enough, I am picking Persepolis.
I knew it.
Yeah, when I was thinking about, I'm trying to remember, I was like, oh, it's either Junam or Persepolis for this.
Yeah.
And then I wrote both, and then when I got to Motherland, I was like, it's really Persepolis.
Yeah.
Because it is that, like, it's that seminal movie of this guy or of this woman who kind of came out of the revolution, is studying abroad, and then she has to come to terms with what happened to Iran. That whole second half of Persepolis is about the life of a student outside of Iran while the revolution happens, and then going back to Iran and seeing it, which is also why I don't think that Motherland really needs to be a feature. I think it would be more interesting to just watch Motherland and then watch Persepolis, then have those conversations of, well, what did these young people go through around that time? And what happened to Iran during their time away? Did they go back? Was it the same country? Can you ever really go back to the home that you left? Right? So
absolutely.
For that, it comes to Persepolis.
Amazing.
Afra?
Mine is Man Push Cart.
Oh, that's a great film.
This is my favorite immigrant film ever made.
Yeah, that's a great film. Yeah.
Yeah. It's by Ramin Bahrani, who's an Iranian-American filmmaker.
Yeah.
He makes most of his films about...
We mentioned this film before, too. I think I might have, or you?
Yeah,
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I love him. And I've like, Chop Shop is another great one. But Man Push Cart, it's not necessarily the same thing because the immigrant is not a student, but... he's a Pakistani. He was a rock star and he was like really well known. He's really great. And so a lot of the part of the immigrant experience for a lot of people is that you come and your like life status is changed. You like have to start from zero again. And so that film, similarly, like for different reasons, it kind of shows how tiring his new life is. And by the end of it, he's exhausted. And so the same thing with Motherland at the end, at that phone booth scene. He's exhausted with this new life. He's tired of fighting every day just to fit in, just to survive. And I think Man Push Cart does the same thing.
Great. All right. For the final stages, we will take Damn That's Poetry, our favorite performance prize, Festival of Cons if you have some, and then we'll wrap up our final thoughts on the films in general. And no grades will be given on these films. I repeat, no grades will be given. Damn That's Poetry. Do you guys have any from any of the four films, a line that really stuck out to you?
So for I Am Trying to Remember, I'm going to say this. She's talking to Gholam, who visits her in her dream one night. And she's reminiscing about that conversation. She says,
چرا پاکت کردن؟ گفت شاید ترسیدن.
Why did they erase you? He says, maybe because they are scared. I said, who's Pegah, whoever is scared should erase themselves.
گفتم هر کی میترسید بعد برمی‌داشت خودشو پاک میکرد. گفت اون وقت صورت همه زنده ها پاک میشد و فقط اونا که مرده بودن میموندن.
He said, in that case, the faces of the living would all be gone and only the dead would remain.
Great. Farn, you go. Pick whichever one you want. You pick your favorite one, because I've got one for each Empty Your Pockets and Motherland.
For Empty Your Pockets, my favorite one is...
یه قارچی هست. این مورچه‌ها رو هیپنوتیزم می‌کنه براش برگ بیارن. در ازاش خود قارچه تغذیه‌شون می‌کنه. یعنی کاملا به هم وابسته‌اند. اما متاسفانه جنگلی که لخت میشه دیگه.
There is a fungus that hypnotizes ants to bring it leaves. In exchange, the fungus nourishes the ant. They're entirely codependent. But unfortunately, they'll strip the forest bare. And the reason that that's my favorite is it very succinctly summarizes the relationship between the regime and those who enable the will of the regime in Iran. and the ramifications of that on Iranian society.
That's an excellent one. That was on mine too. That was on my list. I will go into the one that I gushed about. The line spoken beautifully by John Ralston, written by Jasmin Mozaffari.
I've been sold a lie.
For all of the reasons I had referenced earlier in my deeper analysis, that line resonated with me so deeply. I found it so succinct and yet encapsulated so much of the fear and paranoia and frustration that 20th century immigrants and white suburbians lived and feared alike. Favorite performance? I want to give it to Sonia Sanjari, who played Mariam in Retouch. I think there's so much quiet elegance and grace performed in that role with very little dialogue and really captivating. And she's in every scene in the movie, I think, and has very little dialogue and very few actors to play off of. And she carries the film. So it's like acting with her eyes. And I really like it for that reason. So that's my pick.
Mm-hmm. Mine is Betesh Fazlali from Motherland. I just think like he shows such a range of emotions in that film. Like he starts off like he's running, he's a badass, he's fighting, and then he's really confident with his friend. He's like, I'm like Bruce Lee, and he's doing all that. Then he's kind of like he's like the cool guy with sunglasses on. He's got his girlfriend in the car, they're driving. There's that moment where I think everything kind of switches when he looks at the newspaper and he sees the headline about, the look like his friend had hinted at like bearded people being the people who are burning American flags and that everyone hates. Mm-hmm. And then he goes and shaves. And from that point on, he's kind of like, it feels like he's shaved. That's kind of like where he submitted a little bit. And then he's much more, I don't know, raw after that. And then you see him go through this like really painful event as well. And like, I don't know, he exhibits such a range of emotions that it's really hard to do in like a 24-minute film. I think he does a great job.
Yeah. Great. Faranjun.
Here's the thing. I feel like the leads of all these films have gotten so much praise and love that I want to give a special shout out to Nima Gholamipur, who plays Bahram in Motherland. He has like one quick scene, and in that one scene, he won me over so quick, and his character is so well crafted. I think he doesn't get enough love and attention for it. Yeah, special shout out to him. It's great.
Yeah.
He's so endearing. He's so fun.
He was great. I did want to see more of him. Like I would be interested in his story.
Yeah.
Great. Festival of Cons, formerly known as Nitpicks, Hot Takes, What Aged Poorly. I really don't have anything to say. I think like one of the things about a successful short film is you have to be so efficient with your time that there's very little room for wasted moments. And I wouldn't pick any of these films to be on my top list if I found that any of them had wasted moments or deficient performances or things that were nitpicks or hot takes or things that aged poorly. So it's a blank slate for me on this topic.
Same here.
I think short filmmakers should be given more money so that they can have more time and resources to complete their visions. Because I know, having looked into the BTS for these films, that all of these filmmakers have things that they wish they had a little more time with, and I would have loved to have seen what they would have done with it.
Final thoughts on any of these films? Afra, why don't you go? Tell us what this means to you.
What this means to me?
I see for the listeners, he's welling up with emotion and crying right now quietly.
Oh my God.
I was really moved.
I'm really excited to be here. I don't really have final thoughts. This was a good conversation. We talked about some films. It was a good time. I think shorts deserve more acknowledgement and coverage. I think a lot of like the big film podcasts never talk about shorts. So I'm glad you guys are doing this, especially for Iranian shorts. Like we talked about, like budgets are always low for Iranian films. Mm-hmm. And so you can get some really good short films out of that because feature filmmakers are also working with similar budgets. And so our stories, especially in the diaspora, like Motherland and Empty Your Pockets, like film made by people in the diaspora, are going to start with shorts.
Yeah. And
I think these are some significant ones, and we're starting to tell our own story, and I hope that people will watch shorts.
Thank you, Afra.
I want to be the Guillermo del Toro, what he is for animation. I want to be that for shorts.
Ooh.
Everyone should go watch shorts.
Faranjun, any final thoughts on these films or in short films in general?
Or Batman Begins.
Yeah. I think we're seeing a very interesting time in diasporic filmmaking where we're seeing kind of that boom of our stories being told, and it is starting with shorts. So it's exciting to see these films And it makes me more excited to see what our community will continue to make as we make feature films and tell our own stories in feature film format. We have a few that have been coming out, and I'm excited to see the plethora of others that will follow.
The roots of Iranian cinema, perhaps more than any other country, begins with short filmmaking. From the early works of Abbas Kiarostami discovering his voice at the Institute of Intellectual Development of Children and Young Adults, also known as Kanun, to the groundbreaking experimentation of Forough Farrokhzad and her poetic cinema masterpiece, The House is Black. The short film format has been a crucible for artistic expression and innovation. Telling an effective story in a short amount of time is, unbeknownst to many, more challenging than crafting a feature, as the filmmaker must distill narrative, emotion, and meaning within a limited scope and runtime. In Iranian cinema, this has led to a tradition of storytelling that is deeply poetic, layered with metaphor, and reflective of broader social and cultural dynamics. These films often transcend their brevity, embodying a sense of universality that lingers long after the screen fades to black. As we consider this collection, we are reminded of the profound impact that even the smallest of cinematic works can have, shaping the trajectory of a nation's film history while touching the hearts and minds of audiences worldwide. In Iranian cinema, this connection often transcends language and borders, reminding us that even the briefest stories can leave the deepest marks. To Pegah Ahangarani, Tara Aghdashloo, Jasmin Mozaffari, and Kaveh Mazaheri, we salute you, celebrate you, and thank you for your contributions to Iranian cinema. May you live long and prosper. I don't know where to go from there.
May the force be with you.
Thank you so much, Afra, for joining us on today's short film podcast.
خواهش میکنم.
Thank you, Afra.
Faranjun, thank you for always being a bro for show.
Thank you, Kaveh.
You know how I feel about you.
Unfortunately.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And to everybody, Beomid Didar.
Bye.
Nothing about shorties and gordies?
Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how much you like gourds.
And shorts.
And share with your friends.
We should have called this Who Wears Short Shorts. Who loves short shorts? We love short shorts.
Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.